Hello, hello. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the TMI Show, Ted Manila Information Show, where we, of course, bring you too much information. Today, we're doing a slightly different format than we ordinarily would because there literally is too much information to get to in a 30-minute interview segment. So we're making it a full hour with, of course, one of our favorites. Our friend Mark Sleboda is joining us. He's in the virtual backstage. We're going to pull him up here in just a minute. Reminder, whatever platform you guys are watching on, please make sure to like and subscribe or follow, depending on, if it's YouTube or Rumble. And if you're listening on the RSS feeds, we appreciate you being there. And please do share all of this content to help us grow our little channel. We are around 100 days old at this point. So we still need your help.
You're making me feel old.
We're almost 100 days old. We need your help to continue growing this program and making this a thing. So come on, get at it. Click like, click subscribe, and we can keep bringing you unique information that mainstream media doesn't do. We're live Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. Eastern. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead. Ted, if you want to introduce our guest, I'm going to pop him on.
Let's go ahead and do it. Good morning, Mark. Just bear with me while I read through the intro here. The big deep freeze in U.S. Russian relations seems to be going through a very quick thaw. Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump talked for about an hour and a half yesterday, according to Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov, as well as according to President Trump on Truth Social. The call was lengthy and highly productive, Trump said on Truth. We discussed Ukraine, the Middle East, energy, artificial intelligence, the power of the dollar, and various other subjects. They agree that they want to stop the millions of deaths taking place in the war with Russia and Ukraine, Trump added. Just an interjection here, it's really hundreds of thousands of deaths. Announcing an immediate start of negotiations to resolve the Ukraine conflict. The two leaders discussed the Middle East and Iran's nuclear program, agreed to meet in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and then to visit one another for state visits, presumably Trump in going to Moscow and Putin going to Washington, D.C. So this is obviously, for people who've been following the effort to isolate Russia diplomatically and economically for the last 3 to 4 years and before that, this is just absolutely staggering news. What's next for Russia, the United States, and Ukraine? Mark Sleboda is joining us to talk about it. He's an international relations and security analyst. Follow Mark on Twitter at Mark Sleboda1, on his YouTube channel at The Real Politic with the C and a K with Mark Sleboda, and get him over on Facebook at facebook.com/Gramsci, GRAMSCI. Mark, thanks for joining us here on the not on the final countdown. On the
retread. Ted Manila, thanks for having me. It's always an honor and a pleasure to be on the TMI show.
That's right.
I have to say, with that list, the length of conversation between Trump and Putin and the length of topics they discussed, I'm only slightly surprised that the results of the Super Bowl and how obviously the Chiefs should have won. And who has the superior beer didn't come up.
That's the United States, clearly.
I don't drink beer, so I'm not going to come.
And I do like me a Russian beer, but it's more about the power than the taste. Let's put it that way.
By the way, guys, there's breaking news just as we were bringing Mark on. According to BBC, Vladimir Zelensky has spoken to them, and he is trying to project strength right now, and he is saying that he will not accept any peace deal that's agreed upon by Russia and the U.S. without his involvement. So
he'll be involved. He'll sit out in the hall while the big boys discuss what's going to be done. And then, by the way, that's what happened at the in 1919 at the Paris at the treaty when they negotiated the Treaty of Versailles over a lot of months. The great powers sat down with cartographers in the Hall of Mirrors at Versailles, and they had all the little guys wait out in the hall to see, what their borders were going to be, or even if they were going to have a country. And this is true. They literally forgot about Kurdistan. I mean, there was just so much drinking going on. And it was like, we'll catch you next time, bros. and here we are 100 years later. So that could happen. Zelensky
Not
will be involved,
but
he'll hear all
just
about it.
a year ago, we had a situation where Russia was not invited to supposed peace conferences, right?
That's right.
That were to that the Kiev regime, all the NATO countries were there. They tried to rope and dope third world country. I mean, the global South and third world countries, China, India. They tried to get these Brazil. They tried to get the BRICS countries to attend, and at the last one, they're like, well, Russia can come. They can sit out in the hall, and when we've all decided the terms, then we'll invite them in and present them with it, right? So, I mean, quid pro quo. I mean, that's the situation. I mean, first of all, the fact that there has been a telephone conversation between the Russian president and the American president after an absence of 3 years, when at times we have literally been a hair trigger away from World War III, right? With the U.S. firing ballistic missiles into Russia, right? In the final days of the Biden regime. We can't talk about how positive a step that is. Even if we get no further than where we are now, they're talking to each other. The intelligence agencies of both countries are talking to each other. There has already been an exchange of prisoners, or a deal for an exchange of prisoners. The Russian prisoner is evidently going to be released in the next few days. The American prisoner in Russia, Mark Fogel, was released a couple days ago. But I mean, these are already incredibly positive steps, and it has led, to a degree of panic and horror and terror in both Kiev, Brussels, Berlin, London. Take your pick. They're just aghast at this entire thing. There was a column out by you're probably both familiar with the name Roland Oliphant, who has been a rather anti-Russian journalist for many, many, many years, but a piece out in the British press this just in the last 24, 48 hours, saying that this is Trump and Putin's world, and that Europe and Ukraine are just left out in the cold and no longer a part of the conversation, which, I mean, if anything is to be settled, right? If there is any chance, forget peace. If there's even a chance of de-escalation, then that's the way it needs to happen, because Europe is still many European leaders. We can't speak in the total, because there is Orban and Fico and possibly soon Gorgescu in Romania. But many European leaders are absolutely committed to continuing this conflict, and they, I mean, French and Danish fighter jets were just sent to Kiev regime over the weekend, right? I mean, not useful ones, right? Old junk they were about to decommission and get rid of, but still, that's been a long story of this conflict. So I think these are already incredibly positive steps. Again, there is still a long way to go towards a peace settlement. What is going to happen? They're already talking about scheduling a summit in Saudi Arabia, which is, at least as far as this conflict goes in recent relations, a neutral country, agreeable on both sides in this affair. A good pick, another good pick would be the UAE, but Saudi was obviously the pick. But they are not going to be signing a peace agreement at this summit. They may be talking about it, right? But this is something that the negotiations, whether they go somewhere or not, are probably going to be lengthy affair, right? And at some point, yes, the rest of NATO will have to, I don't know what to say, be brought into this, but be brought to heel. I mean, if anything is to be settled, and the Kiev regime too. And it becomes far more problematic with them because Putin has already multiple times pointed out that Zelensky, as far as the Russian government goes, and he's basing this off of the Ukrainian constitution, an illegitimate leader because his term expired last year, and he is only maintaining power through continued extensions of martial law.
Of democracy, Mark. You said it wrong.
As far as I'm concerned, there hasn't been a legitimate leader in Ukraine since the Westpac Maidan Putsch in 2014, with all the political parties representing East Ukraine and all the leftist parties in the country banned, all critical media banned and taken under government control. I mean, all the leaders of the major opposition parties, even one of the pro-Maidan parties, Poroshenko, the candy oligarch who led the Kiev regime before Zelensky, they've all been charged with treason for not being loyal to Zelensky's regime. And so, I mean, there is no politics, even much less democratic politics within the Kiev regime. It really is a tin pot Banderite fascist dictatorship. So
we're right here at the, about to see the kickoff of the Munich Security Conference, where obviously there was this horrific, apparently terror attack, the car ramming thing that happened. I don't know how close that is to where the conference is being held, but we've already heard the new Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, yesterday, before Trump revealed that the phone call happened, say that there is going to, at a NATO conference, say that there is no NATO for Ukraine. There are no pre-2014 borders for Ukraine. And the U.S. is going to stop funding this war campaign. I would say that's kind of dictating, no?
First of all, I'm not so sure about the last one there. I'm not so sure that I got the last one out of that. That the U.S. is going to stop providing funding.
I didn't hear that either. I don't think that.
Yeah. Well, because Trump said it. Trump said that it doesn't make sense for us to keep funding the war.
He did say that. He did say, but he wasn't specific about like a
timeline. These are really nice words. This is the Russian position. Those are nice words. Right. Those are nice sentiments.
No. But my question is, what about these our so-called NATO allies? I mean, how do you think they're going to respond to, this, I would say, underwhelming SecDef that has come into office? But you know what? He just shot both pistols out, poo, 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 pew, pew. Yeah. And he's like, this is what's happening from Washington's side. Is that going to bring NATO to heel? Are they actually, are the NATO allies going to be like, no, we're going to keep supplying whatever to this little dude here acting as president in Ukraine?
Yeah. Obviously, the rest, leaders, other European leaders of NATO, Olaf Scholz in Germany, although he has a very limited time span too, it must be said.
Yes.
Keir Starmer in the United Kingdom. Macron in France, who probably also has a very limited hang time.
Correct.
And very contested power.
Yeah.
But certainly Poland, the Baltic states, Scandinavia, none of them will agree to any of this, right? Just Keir Starmer just reiterated over the past 48 hours, the Prime Minister of the UK, that Ukraine's rightful place is in NATO. So obviously they're on two completely different pages there.
But they don't have, but they're writing checks that they can't cash, right? I mean,
absolutely, but they can also wait out Trump.
Weapons to
Trump is gone in 4 years, right? I mean, that's the way they look at it.
Eternity for the Ukrainians. I mean, I think
it is an eternity for the Ukrainians, right? But a war can always be restarted. I mean, they're already the NATO leaders. If you listen to Mark Rutte, if you listen to European like von der Leyen, they're convinced that they will be at war with Russia in 5 years.
I think they're high as hell. I don't think that's going to happen. I think Zelensky sees the writing on the wall. He's already preparing his Swiss bank account, Cayman retirement plan. I think this is it. He sees it, he knows it's over unless Trump like drops dead and JD Vance has a different idea. It's over.
Yeah, I don't think JD Vance has a different idea, but I'm not so sure it's over yet. I mean,
Right.
I think that's really, really premature because I still can't see any way that any U.S. president can agree to Russian terms. And Russia will obviously not agree to American terms.
Well, let's talk about those terms.
Well,
I mean, my theory about what these terms look like are as follows. First of all, I think we should talk about Trump's desire. I've never heard of such a thing. Trump is the U.S. is Ukraine's ally, principal supporter militarily and economically. And yet it is asking for reparations from Ukraine. It wants, we want $500 billion in rare earth materials. This isn't Russia asking for them. We want them. And as Manila pointed out before we went live, all those goodies are mostly in the Russian occupied territories anyway. So how does that all look? It's very strange.
Yeah, that this whole thing is this idea that the Kiev regime couldn't be put in hock to Trump for rare earth minerals. This is all just fantasy. I mean, there's no reality to it whatsoever. And here's the thing: rare earth minerals are actually not that rare. I mean, you could say they're uncommon, but it's simply a matter of where they're found. Is it practical and profitable to extract them in quantities sufficient to make money? Because the process to extract them is the most awful and destructive strip mining of ground, of land that is imaginable. You have to filter huge amounts of earth through chemical processes to extract even a moderately profitable amount of rare earths. And this has not been done for decades now, right? Since rare earths have been identified as valuable for high-tech purposes. So first of all, you're right that already a majority of the deposits of rare earth are already in territories that Russia controls. And the rest of it is in territory that Russia will almost certainly soon control, certainly in the next half a year. So that's false on that accord. And the idea that these can just be, that it's money in the bank on these things, that's not necessarily true either.
It reminds me a lot of Dick Cheney's idea that Iraq was going to pay for the price of its own invasion. We saw how that worked out. Energy prices,
or Mexico paying for the wall.
Energy prices, gas prices have skyrocketed and never come back down to where they were anywhere close. But Mark, so I mean, my theory is, I mean, I know I'm jumping ahead in your view, and you're skeptical about this. So let's stipulate that. But I think what we're going to end up with is something that looks like this: no NATO membership for Ukraine. Both sides agree that they're not adversaries. Ukraine is free to join the EU if they should so want as an economic union. The Ukraine recognizes the annexation of Crimea. Ukraine does not recognize the annexation of the Donbass, but accepts it tacitly. On the map, it remains in Ukraine, but in reality, it's like Kurdistan in Iraq. It's administered separately. It is part of Russia. We all know the reality, but there's like one of those dotted lines on the map. And that's how this stays. I think that's where we end up. What do you think?
Okay. Yeah, that's absolutely 100% reiterated multiple times from President Putin to the foreign minister, everyone on down. Those are completely unacceptable to Russia. None of those conditions are acceptable to Russia. None.
First Russia's going to compromise some, even though, I mean, they're the victors. But like even at the end of World War II, the Japanese got the right to keep their emperor after they'd been nuked. I mean, the loser does get something, right?
I mean, I don't know. I don't know that that's necessarily.
What's the lovely parting gift?
Yeah, I don't.
The gift bag.
Russia is not in a forgiving mood, and they are winning too much. First of all, let's address the NATO thing. The U.S. the U.S. Secretary of Defense says, as a result of this settlement, it is not practical or realistic for Ukraine to join NATO. Okay, that is a world away from any type of guarantees that Russia will accept as a commitment that both the Kiev regime in Ukraine and the United States can be held to into the future, because they're not looking for a cessation of hostilities for a year or 4 years or anything like that. First of all, neutrality was already enshrined in the Ukrainian constitution up until the U.S. backed putsch in 2014.
Yeah, but the Ukrainians were apparently crossing their fingers when they signed the Minsk Accords.
Okay, so how is Russia to trust any of that? After both rounds of Minsk Accords were codified in a UN Security Council resolution, and Western countries never intended to fulfill them and just use them as time to build up the Kiev regime's armies.
If I were talking to President Putin, I would say you have a different American president to deal with. You have a different set of facts on the ground now.
But Trump is gone in 4 years. Russia can't just rely on Trump. Russia has to look into the future. When Trump came into office, he pulled out of the JCPOA the first time around. And if Trump signs even a treaty, let's say there's actually a treaty formed where the U.S. promises, pinky swears, that it will never allow Ukraine into NATO, what's to stop the next U.S. president from just pulling out of it too? How do you convince Russia that they can trust after so many treaties have been pulled out of, after so many treaties have been abused, after all the deceptions from the February 21st agreement to the two Minsk Accords to the Istanbul communique? How is Russia to receive any type of codified guarantees?
Putin and Russia and his advisors have obviously considered that question, and
yes,
they're still willing. They're obviously amenable to a diplomatic solution.
To talk. That's all they're willing to do. But they haven't budged an inch on their demands. First of all, the Donbass is a part of Russia. What's more, according to the Russian constitution, which is not something that Putin can politically walk away from, the Kherson region and Zaporozhye are also part of Russia. They are regions of the Russian Federation. There is no political climate, there is no political position to walk away from those. It's impossible. And at this point,
Trump can explain all about how American presidents ignore a constitution. It's super easy.
Trump maybe American presidents ignore their constitution.
Yes, they do.
This is if Putin walked away from that, he would be declared a loser, and he would never. That would be the end of Putin's power in Russia. That is the political climate in the country right now. He can't. It's a position. First of all, they've never given any indication that they will walk away from that.
Well,
it has to be said.
I still think they're going to, if they have the facts on the ground recognized, for the first.
Kherson City and Zaporozhye are still in the Kiev regime's hands, right? The two biggest cities in those regions. So, and Russia taking them is still months away. Let's talk. If anything is to be signed with Zelensky, right, and with a Ukrainian leader, there have to be elections in Ukraine, quote unquote elections.
Well, Trump has
those will take months to carry out, right? Months. It's not something that can happen next week. The conflict continues until then, because Russia has said again and again and again there will be no ceasefire until everything is settled. No ceasefire. Because every time we give you a ceasefire, both rounds of the Minsk Accords, Istanbul communique, you just use it to rearm and retrain.
Everyone postures, right? Everyone's a badass. Everybody's pushing, say, oh, I won't compromise. But in reality, people compromise. History shows that.
I do not see, after how much repetition of these conditions, how firm Russia has been, how much Russians have sacrificed for this conflict, and the dangers still going.
Think about how firm Zelensky has been. We will not even talk to that son of a bitch. It would be illegal. I will arrest myself if I talk to Putin.
I'm going to have to beg to differ, Ted. Putin is not Volodymyr Zelensky.
Well, true. but yeah.
I really don't see,
and they both hold very different set of cards.
Like where Russia might, I would think it would be a huge mistake. Where Russia has some room for compromise is on the demilitarization of Ukraine and the denazification, right? Which, in truth, neither of those can be fully committed without complete regime change in Kiev and probably up to the Polish border, right?
Yeah.
They could require a denazification law, like all the Banderite
absolutely.
Have to
all the
come
Banderites
down
would have to be lustrated from Ukrainian politics, like the Kiev regime did to all of the opposition politicians that were opposed to it when it seized power in 2014, right? The glorification of Stepan Bandera and Shukovich and other leaders of the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists and the Ukrainian Insurgent Army that were Nazi collaborators in World War II would have to be forbidden by law. All of these sorts of things. All of these armed formations, Azov, these militant groups, but also their political movements they are now teaching Ukrainian children in school.
They'd have to be banned.
Yeah, that would all have to be banned, right? And Russians are very hot on that.
I think
you would have to have
that's a reason. Honestly, from over here, people don't get it because they have been propagandized. But if I were Russia, I wouldn't settle on that. I would need
Mark,
that.
One of the viewers, Adrian, asked you a question. I mean, you've largely answered it, but he did say that Pete Hegseth, has said painful concessions have to be made on both sides.
No,
Adrian
they don't,
because
Russia's winning. They don't have to be made on.
Adrian wants to know, what concessions do you think the U.S. has in mind for Russia, and obviously will Russia agree to them? I think the answer is no. But what do you think the U.S. is gonna try to, I don't know, twist Putin's arm into before Putin says no?
Yeah, see, I think this is all a trap. I said this when Trump was first elected, that it would probably be better for Russia in the end result if Kamala Harris had been elected, because the one thing that will keep this Banderite fascist regime in Kiev in power is a deal pushed by Trump. That is the trap here, right? That is the only thing that can keep this regime in place.
Trump claims that he's demanding elections, that Zelensky stand for elections, and we know that.
What do elections mean in Ukraine when all the opposition parties are banned and all the opposition leaders are charged with treason?
Well, that would have to change.
So if we replace Zelensky with a committed Banderite fascist like Zaluzhny, how is that any better? That doesn't help Russia in the slightest. There can't be any elections in Ukraine that are anyway fair or democratic, even approaching it, while this regime remains in power. That's the truth of it.
So you don't think there's going to be any sort of formal talks that include Ukraine, that formal or trilateral talks rather?
Sure.
Because
yes,
yes.
I think talks will definitely happen, and they will go on for months and months and months, and there will probably in the end be no real agreement. Yes,
Mark, I normally agree with you. I don't think
I'm optimistic.
Yeah, I think you asked me what the plan that the U.S. was going to try to push on Russia, and what you just said is the plan that the U.S. would like to push on Russia, and that I don't believe that, and I've never heard any Russian official in any way suggests that any of that is acceptable to Russia at this point.
Yeah, but I mean that's obvious. That's that's posturing, right? I mean,
no, I don't think that's posturing at this point. I think Russia has gone through and suffered and endured too much. Just NATO, right? A promise from the U.S. that they won't bring Ukraine into NATO is not enough. They also have to promise no Western military bases in Ukraine, that West doesn't train Ukrainian troops, that no Western missiles are placed in Ukraine. It's not just NATO, no de facto NATO either. No, none of what has happened for the last.
Yeah, I mean, Russia can get other concessions too. They can say we don't want missiles in Poland, right? Pointing at us.
That is where they're probably willing to make concessions on. The demands they made in 2022 about the rollback of NATO to the to the 1940s. That is where they're willing to negotiate and compromise on at this point, right? The Polish and Romanian bases of the U.S., the expansion of NATO,
and
to
Trump's
include
happy to
the
do that.
Baltic. Yeah, Trump is. But those are the things that Russia's actually willing to compromise on.
And
not
be very
Kherson,
useful. They'd be very
not
useful from a
Zaporozhye.
long-time perspective. I mean, look. I think everybody's got a strong motivation to talk here. That's why I think people are so optimistic here. Everyone wants to bring this in for a landing. You've got a great opportunity here. These two guys, this is kind of like when Reagan met Gorbachev, and he said, "I can do business with this guy." These two men can do business, I think.
Absolutely. Everyone wants this to end. Everyone wants to talk. I'd agree. But as always, it's the details, because everyone wants this to end on their terms, or terms that are acceptable to them. And Russia's terms, and what the U.S. imagines walking away from this with some type of face-saving position, are a world away.
Well, that is also an argument, right? I mean, Trump can tell Putin, listen, you got to give me something for my domestic consumption. Otherwise, I'm going to have my ass kicked.
Because this is a Biden war.
I've got neocons. He can say,
Trump has positioned it that way.
Here, right? And
Trump has positioned it that way, even on the campaign trail, that this is a Biden war. He's, said multiple times over and over that this probably would have never happened under his watch. And I think, a couple of days ago we covered this, that Vladimir Putin was playing into Trump's ego by saying, yeah, maybe, and maybe the election was stolen
by agreeing that, like, the 2020, Putin said that poor Trump, the election was stolen from him in 2020. Right. That's the only thing that Putin said that made
playing
me
to ego. I'm gonna pop our producer Robbie in here as well, because I know he's got a couple of questions and perspectives that he wants to present to Mark. Sure. Producer Robbie, there you are. I'm gonna reposition this. Go ahead and start talking. Okay. I'm gonna start moving some boxes.
Oh, sounds good. In this situation, I got to admit, I am Team Mark. The esteemed producer of the TMI Show is going to respectfully disagree with Ted Rall.
Team Russia Hawk. That's Team Russia Hawk.
Well, I mean, like what you said, Russia's winning. So why does the victor concede anything? That makes no sense. Abraham Lincoln did not concede anything to Jefferson Davis in the war between
Russia. Around 100,000 Russians have died in this conflict so far, many of them by U.S. weapons. Yeah. The Kremlin is willing to talk, but they are not willing to sacrifice their terms and goals for this conflict so that Donald Trump can save face domestically in the U.S. That is a conceit that does not concern the Kremlin at all.
Every loser gets something in a peace negotiation, and
you can keep your bases in Poland and Romania. That's the concession.
The Confederacy got the right to be reintegrated into the United States and former Confederate soldiers were not tried as traitors, and they were allowed to come back and be. I mean, that was a concession, right? That's not something that the Union wanted to do. I'm just saying.
No. Yeah. I mean, we can talk about that at a different time, but I think that one of the questions I have for you, Mark, and you touched on it a little bit before, does a guarantee that Ukraine will not join NATO, does it matter if Ukraine continues, if the Ukrainian army continues being retrained and retooled to NATO standards? No. I mean, it's
de facto NATO. No, de facto NATO is not enough. No, absolutely not. That is not acceptable to Russia. The only troops that Russia will accept in Ukraine as part of a peacekeeping mission are Russian troops, right? No European troops where they take the NATO hat off and put the EU hat on, right?
That's not white helmets.
Well, how about North Korean troops? I mean, they're already there anyway, right? Can the North Koreans come in? I mean, wouldn't that be viable? Now, my second question: do you think that that Putin will push to have the SWIFT sanctions revoked?
I don't think is a priority. Honestly, Russia removal of sanctions is actually not a Russian priority. I know the West thinks the leverage that
I would like for that to be a priority.
Personally, I would like that.
Yeah, but it's not here. We get along fine without it, right? The Russian economy is growing. Russians' average salaries have increased.
But it's
Russia's
not like those It's not like those sanctions are helping, right? I mean,
No,
Putin
they're
would
not.
be happy to see them.
No, actually, no. There is an argument to be made that a lot of the growth that Russia has experienced is a direct result of the sanctions, because Russian oligarchs and businessmen have been forced to actually reinvest money in the country and Russian businesses over the years. And all of that substitution of goods that previously came from Western companies, most of it, some of it's import substitution with BRICS countries and the like, but the majority of it is now done by Russian manufacturing, Russian agriculture. These businesses are booming. So there's actually a very good economic case to make that the strong Russian growth that continues is not despite Western sanctions, but actually because of them.
So you don't think he's gonna? But I mean, Trump. I mean, obviously, Putin will ask, right? Hey, do you mind?
I don't know if Russia really wants to make itself vulnerable to that type of financial and economic leverage again. I don't.
Well, I mean, you can get the sanctions lifted, and then you don't have to give up BRICS. You don't have to give up your new relationship with China. You don't have to give anything up. Nothing bad happens as a result.
Well, Trump sees the alliance between Russia and China as a geopolitical threat. So I think he would want that to. I don't see 100%. And I think that's something that Trump would insist on, that the relationship between China and Russia come to an end, which should be suicide.
Yeah, he can't.
Yeah, that's not going to happen.
Russia cannot and should not do that.
No, they absolutely will not.
So I'll go away so now you smart people can talk.
No, you're welcome to pop on any time. Obviously, there's a map I'm showing here of all the neighboring countries that are can potentially make any long-term or lasting peace difficult, I guess, to say the least, right, Mark? Yes. You got some neighbors
right now. There's a lot of talk in Russia that the Kiev regime and the Baltic countries are prepared to are well along the way of the preparation of a false flag event in the Baltic Sea to try to force NATO into war against Russia right now. They have recalled their citizens. They've told their citizens to come back to make sure they're in the countries before the borders close. They've cut themselves off from the electrical grid with Russia and Belarus that they had previously been a part of. Russian intelligence has warned that there is a plot to blow up a ship effectively and blame Russia to try to block the Baltic Sea and then stage a provocation with Russia. If you think that the European countries that want war and the host of people that still are the absolute overwhelming majority in the U.S. blob are just going to accept Trump making at least a genuine attempt to de-escalate the situation with Russia, that they're just going to let that happen and not try every dirty trick in the book that they can to stop it, absolutely they will.
I believe that. I just don't they'll try. I just don't think it'll work in the long run or in the middle run. Let's talk about Iran. I know the two men, there's been reports that Israel is planning to launch a military attack on Iranian nuclear industrial facilities. That Trump does not want that to happen. He's trying to convince Israel not to do that. They're meeting. Should we make anything out of choosing Riyadh as the site of a summit? As of course Saudi Arabia being the biggest and most powerful Sunni Muslim country and the biggest enemy of Iran, the biggest Shia country. Is that sort of like a leaning on Iran? Trump has said he wants a deal with Iran. He wants to be friends with Iran. He just doesn't want Iran to have a nuclear bomb ever. That's the one thing he doesn't want. And the implication was that Iran could possibly even be reintegrated into the Western system if they agree to that. Is this part of the Trump typical thing, like, let me lean on you hard and then cut a deal?
I mean, if you want to say, like a Trump madman theory where he goes in with all kinds of bluff and bluster,
yeah, like
and
he did with the Truth Social from a few weeks ago when he was saying, like, Ukraine, Russia had better settle, and then here we are.
Okay, so first of all, let me just say another thing, along with its relationship with China, that Russia will not sacrifice to Trump or to any future U.S. administration, is its relation with Iran. And that has just been solidified in a new, deepened, and strengthened strategic partnership that it is widely assumed will see Russia build up Iran's air defense and electronic warfare network to prevent exactly such an Israeli and U.S. attacks on Iran, although that will take several years to come to complete fruition.
Mm-hmm.
But an interesting part, if you go into the details of that strategic partnership, is also that Iran doesn't build nuclear weapons, right? That
Right.
Russia provides a conventional
It doesn't
deterrent.
want nuclear weapons. Iran really doesn't want them.
It has been pushed to the point where it is reconsidering that.
Right.
There have been conversations at the highest level in Iran.
Well, it's out of fear.
Yeah, out of fear, right? Out of pushing. But so first of all, Iran and Saudi Arabia are not the Shia Sunni grand enemies that they once were, right? And negotiations that China brought to the end, but that were put forward by many different countries before that. China, Saudi Arabia, and Iran have restored diplomatic relations. They've gone a long way. It's not to say that they're bosom buddies, right? Or anything now, but Saudi Arabia has walked away from that position that the U.S. has pushed them to decades of this U.S. Israeli Saudi tripod hegemony against Iran in the region. Saudi was not so interested in that anymore, and just walked away. I think so. Israel has already been talking about attack on Iran's nuclear facilities for months and months and months now. And the truth of that is that it appears that Iran has at least, if not a greater capacity for long-range strikes against Israel than Israel has against Israel has against Iran. And Israel can hit, particularly if they have U.S. help, which they would probably need for airstrikes against Iran's nuclear facilities. Iran can turn right around and bomb, launch missiles at Israel's nuclear facilities, right? I mean, Dimona nuclear power plant, where Israel builds its nuclear weapons. If Iran launches a few hypersonic missiles, which they have, into there, Israel would have a very bad day. They're a much smaller country. They can't absorb, radioactive, a blow like that. So
Mark,
I think a lot of this is bluster.
What about Russia's position or friendship, or I don't know, the relationship between, Putin and Bibi, and especially this precarious position with the Middle East being in the same neighborhood, we'll say, with parts of Russia, right, where it concerns them, obviously with Syria being overturned and, led by a new delegation of head choppers there who have rebranded and changed names even for part of the rebrand. I've heard that the Russian talks about maintaining their bases in Syria did not go over well. So it seems like Russia is running out of places in the Middle East where they can park their jets. How do you see this relationship shaking out between Putin and Netanyahu? And obviously he's going to have to protect his country's interest by way of Iran.
Okay, so first of all, Putin and Bibi, Russia and Israel, for the last few decades have had a pretty good business relationship where they can do business with each other. But
It's
that has really,
transactional.
transactional. That has really suffered over the last few years, right? As Netanyahu gets crazier and crazier, and the geopolitical blocks, nascent blocks have solidified, that relationship has really suffered. In Syria, I really don't see Russia keeping those bases there. It's obvious. So Turkey played the largest part in overthrowing the Syrian government and putting Al Qaeda. Let's be honest, Al Qaeda, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham in its place, right?
Sure.
Putin had a conversation with the leader of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, who is styling himself as the president of Syria now. And Hayat Tahrir al-Sham is still recognized in Russia as a terrorist organization. Literally, every time you write Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, by Russian law, you have to write Hayat Tahrir al-Sham is a terrorist organization recognized by the Russian Federation. By the way,
And
the
also
U.S.
by the
also
United States.
recognizes them as a terrorist,
Exactly.
as does the United Nations,
Right.
but that's neither here nor there. So that shows Russia's level of practicality. But Erdogan put them in power, and Erdogan wants the Russian bases to stay there. One, to try to keep Russian-Turkish relations managed, and two, but also as a hedge against the U.S. and Israel, which are still both in Syria. However, does Russia want to give long-term leverage to Turkey and Al-Qaeda over them by having bases in that territory? Whatever benefits those Syrian bases, I don't think are worth it. Russia is working on new bases in Sudan and Libya. I think they're going about a slow motion business of at least preparing to evacuate those bases while waiting, on a definitive, let's see where things go. But I can't see them if Hayat Tahrir al-Sham continues to be in control of Syria. And they've said there will be no elections, not for the foreseeable future, right? So, I mean, there's
Sure.
that would be a joke.
They said 3 to 5 years is the latest.
Yeah, but it's a bad situation in Syria. I think both Turkey and Israel have bitten off far more than they can chew. And Trump looks like he once again wants to try to pull U.S. troops out of Syria. That didn't work so well the last time.
Mark, let's talk about the Middle East, about Gaza. Russia has long been a supporter of the Palestinian cause.
I recognize Palestine as a state, yes.
And this history goes back to the Soviet period. The sympathies are deep. Is there going to be discussion about Trump's plan to annex and ethnically cleanse Gaza between, Putin obviously has thoughts. So what if any, what's the dynamic there? I mean, does a Ukraine deal, is that related at all to what happens in Gaza, or is that just a separate side issue?
Yeah. That's going to be a separate side issue, right? Obviously, Russia opposes it and will speak against it, right? But it probably will not be much at Putin's level, right? It's something that will be delegated lower because there's too much of a priority with the whole Ukraine security architecture, nukes in Europe, that sort of thing, right? Russia's position is obviously they would be horrified and aghast and would oppose any type of openly. Let's be honest. The ethnic cleansing of Palestine has been the policy of every U.S. and Israeli president for decades, right? It has just been a slow motion ethnic cleansing of one house, one settlement bulldozed at a time and replaced with Israeli settlers, colonists brought in from U.S. and European and post-Soviet countries. Now they're just on an accelerated timetable, the U.S. president just normalized the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians from Palestine and is making it out to be some type of real estate deal / humanitarian operation. It's absolutely obscene. It's absolutely obscene. But Russia's not going to push much on that issue. I think the Russian position has got to be where our priority now, particularly now that Syria is gone, everything is laser focused on Ukraine, a little bit maybe on Moldova and some other countries, but everything in the near abroad. And if the United States wants to permanently destroy its diplomatic relations with the entire Islamic world by carrying through with this, then let them make their bed in line.
Let me point out that El-Sisi of Egypt has already preemptively canceled his trip to D.C.
He's holding
over this.
stronger than I thought he would. He is, yeah.
I have a quick question for you, Mark. You're talking about Turkey just a minute ago. Do you see any way that Russia could use the bad relations between Greece and Turkey to its advantage? Like,
I don't think that's actually that important right now. No,
Gotcha.
I mean it's just not a hot button issue even for Greece and Turkey, right? I mean it's something that both continually have on the back burner, but
Gotcha.
for both countries have far more important domestic and other things. I mean,
Gotcha.
Erdogan is suffering through the growing pangs of his new nascent neo-Ottoman empire in Syria and parts of Iraq right now, and he's got far too much on his table. He's already bitten off more than he can chew there, I think.
Gotcha.
So,
I'm just wondering if he could leverage, if he being Putin could leverage the Greeks cause trouble to help him keep his bases in Syria. Or it just doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't matter. It's not that important.
Gotcha.
I think
Thank
they
you.
they all like to continually fight over Cyprus. It's just like it's something a topic you can continue to talk about at the dinner table.
Yeah, I mean,
just gonna
it's
be
not
there.
a hot war or anything, though. I mean,
Right.
it's a war of words at this point. I mean, it's just
Even Greece and Turkey, it's more a war of words that is, it's brought out like an argument at the Thanksgiving table that happens every year and gets trotted out again and again.
Yeah.
But
And
it's then
another
forgotten.
thing.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And also, you took Cyprus, asshole, dick.
Yeah.
I really think that's how this stuff works out. Now, circling all the way back to this perfect phone call between Putin and
It was the
Trump.
best phone call, the hugest phone call of all time.
The biggest. It was a 90-minute phone call. So I think, like, if we examine just that alone, just based on the length of the call and the broadness that the topics that they allegedly covered.
When you have to speak through a translator, 90 minutes isn't actually.
Well, that's true.
That's true.
There's also implications, although Putin can speak English, right?
Yeah, he's a
He
polyglot,
can speak
right?
a little English, but he certainly would not speak English to Trump, even on the phone, right?
Right, because you want to make
Maybe
sure
as
every
a
detail
few
is
words in a side when they're with each other, but on the phone for an important phone call like this, absolutely not.
And they may have spoken before, right? Like on the DL.
Sure.
We don't. There's implications to that. Effect.
Yeah. I don't think that they have had a phone call before this one. I think there's been a lot of rumors that they have since Trump was inaugurated, or even before he was inaugurated. I think this is actually the first phone call that they've had. I mean, I know Trump was playing coy and trying to say an if, and I don't want to say and everything, but I don't think that they've actually.
They were talking to each other through the press, though.
The messaging was very warm. I mean, even talking about how the U.S. Soviet alliance during World War II, the shared
coming to each
sacrifice,
other's countries. That's a big deal.
It did make me laugh when Trump implied that the U.S. had sacrificed as much in World War II
Yeah.
as the Soviet Union had. It's like, you got to check out those numbers, dude. Not even close. But I thought it was very. I mean, and the word that jumped out at me was from Trump's statement that he's interested in a partnership with Russia. I mean, you don't get closer than that.
Yeah, that's the whole. There is a within the MAGA geopolitical viewpoint, if you want to identify as such, there is long trend, a long held belief that they want to partner with Russia and turn Russia against China. I mean, that's long been a fantasy within the MAGA movement, within the geopolitical thinkers close to Trump, if you want to call them that, which I really don't. But anyway, so I think that when he talks about a partnership, that's probably really what he's.
And Mark, do you think there is any way, like we know obviously that Trump is a lame duck, and I know Putin has signaled that this last go around might be his final go around as well as president, and so beyond them, if a peace deal is eventually agreed upon, and there will be, I think, at some point, right?
Yeah.
Maybe not immediately,
Sure.
but a peace deal and even some sort of friendship agreement, if you will, for a lack of better term, they've got to come up with some sort of framework that we know
They'll
takes
friend
months
each
and
other
months and
on
months.
Facebook. Yeah.
Right. They'll make it Facebook official. They'll become friends and all of that. What kind of framework can you imagine that these guys can hammer out that can live beyond their terms in office? What is
Great
is there
question.
anything that can be done to ensure a lasting peace especially between the US and Russia? Can there be a long-term détente rather than this shitty end of the Cold War from the 80s, and then 20 years later we're ramping up Cold War anger and hate once again? I mean, is there any way a framework that can live
Such
past
a good
these two?
question.
Yeah, and John Mearsheimer was asked a very similar question in an interview just this week, right? And I freely, owe a great deal of my perspective of the world and international relations to Mearsheimer and Mearsheimer's books and so forth. And he says, I don't know. If there's a way that a settlement, a broader security architecture can be codified between the Trump administration and the Putin administration that will last and will hold. I don't know what that looks like. He doesn't know, right? And I don't know. Again, so many treaties that the U.S. has walked away from, so many deals. I mean, the ABM treaty, the Open Skies treaty, right? That Trump himself pulled out of, the New START treaty, the Short Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces treaty, the February 21st agreement in Ukraine in 2014, both rounds of the Minsk Accords, the JCPOA with Iran, the Istanbul Community. How can Russia possibly trust any piece of paper to make it slightly more valuable than something to wipe your butt with? The only way is with facts on the ground
and there has to be mutual self-interest, right? I mean, the United States
are the Europeans too, right? I mean,
it has to be tasty.
Conceptions of
American
national
leaders.
interest change, though, because the conceptions of Trump administration's national interests are vastly different than any other U.S. president in living memory, and Trump will be gone in 4 years.
Right.
But Russia has a lot to offer the United States.
Though.
I mean, just think about the energy resources alone, right? I mean,
like Mark, the Europeans have to play into this as well, because like I said, if this is the next 4 years with Trump, there needs to be some sort of framework, a friendly framework that involves everybody. And when is the European view of the Russians going to change, and their rhetoric? When is that going to change? Are the Anglo-Saxons going to be any different than the Western Europeans? Or are they going to continue to all hate Russia?
Yeah, I don't see any change for at least a generation. I mean,
wow.
These things are set in. They're set into the narrative. They're set into the mindset. This entire generation of European foreign policy elite have been mentally colonized by U.S. neocons. I mean, Borrell, von der Leyen, they quote Robert Kagan chapter and verse. The whole garden in the jungle spiel, that's literally ripped from Robert Kagan's book titles, right? Robert Kagan, the arch neocon, the husband of Victoria Nuland, right? I mean, this generation of European foreign policy elite, I mean, with some obvious exceptions.
The Adam and Eve of neoconservatism, as it were, Mark.
Yeah. This messianic supremacist ideology of exceptionalism has spread from the United States to Europe in the last few decades in a big way. That's why Russia is like, we can't even talk to these people. Trump, at least we can talk to, right? But I mean, talking to von der Leyen is like talking to Kamala Harris, right? I mean, it's just impossible. So I don't see that changing for the most part anytime soon.
By the way,
we all hope that there might be some radical change in European politics, but unfortunately, even in the crumbling political systems in France and Germany, things are still aligned to keep radical shifts in foreign policy impossible by all the rest of the crumbling hegemonic parties uniting together to prevent Le Pen from coming to power, to prevent the AfD from coming to power in Germany. And, you know, it may take another 10 or 20 years possibly for a real change in those countries to finally unseat that hegemonic triangulation of power in these primary European countries. I mean,
Mark,
we've seen radical changes in Hungary and Slovakia and possibly now in Romania and Austria, but these West European countries, it's a little more solidified.
Mark, let me ask you about the difference here between the first Trump term and the second Trump term are palpable. It seems clear that Trump was interested in friendlier ties with Russia when he first came into office in 2017, but that was rapidly derailed, and that those dreams went away. And basically, the idea that put Trump was close to Putin, was just existed in the fevered mind of SNL writers, but not in reality.
Those are the Russia gators.
Things got very cold very fast. Obviously, I mean, this is different, right? Or it seems different. Is this likelier to stick? And if so, why? Or if not, why not?
Yeah, it's different. I absolutely agree. It is qualitatively different. Trump obviously doesn't have the guillotine specter of Russiagate hanging as an impeachment threat over his head. Trump is obviously much more in control of the Republican Party. The successful confirmation of Tulsi Gabbard, which I have to say I did not expect and was wrong on.
Me neither.
Indicates that he has considerably more grip on the Republican Party, right? And power leverage against Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham and Susan Collins, and they're afraid of him, right? Second of all, what Trump wants more than anything right now, he is engaged in a war against the U.S. deep state, right? Against the, you want to call it the blob, the permanent bureaucracy, what you want to call it. He is engaged in a heated war with it right now. And U.S. aid is just the most visible tip of that iceberg. He wants to fight that war, right? That war is his priority that he would like to focus on. And that's a far more dangerous war for him, of course. But right now he's got momentum, right? There's a lot of things that are going to end up in the Supreme Court. A lot of things are going to end up in the Supreme Court. But don't think that Russia and China and Iran and other countries aren't aware of that and will be trying to milk that and take advantage while the Trump administration's primary interests are inward looking rather than outward looking. I certainly would. If I was in the Kremlin, right, I would be trying to take advantage of that. And it's not to say that he wants to replace it with a pro-multipolar worldview where the U.S. tries to find a constructive place in a new multipolar world. No, he wants old school imperialism where the Western Hemisphere is mine. Greenland, Canada, Panama are mine. That is his vision, his grand strategy vision. That's not necessarily better for the world or us or Americans than the policy of U.S.-led Western global hegemony. But it is different, right? It will have many of the same characteristics. There'll be some overlap, but there will be differences too. And can it last past the next 4 years? Can Vance, continue on the Trump legacy and cement that type of foreign policy view change into U.S. politics?
Unless, of course, don't forget, Mark, there is the notion that Trump could finagle a third term.
I mean, we could proclaim him the God Emperor of mankind too. I mean,
there's this scheme where they would flip the ticket. Vance would run for president and promise to step down in favor
Putin
of
Medvedev.
Vice President Trump.
Putin Medvedev.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think that would actually be not doing J.D. Vance justice, because that man is formidable. I don't agree with him on a lot, right? But he is a formidable politician. He is sharp, right? I regard him as formidable in a same way that I regard Tulsi Gabbard as formidable. But I actually like Tulsi Gabbard. Again, I don't agree with her on everything, right? But I think that is the single most shining moment of the Trump administration thus far, is the confirmation of Tulsi Gabbard.
Oh, it's tied with
every
RFK.
time.
Totally.
Yeah, every time the U.S. National Security Council meets, and these neocons like Rubio and Waltz and others are Hegseth are whispering in Trump's ears, Tulsi Gabbard will be down the other end of the table saying, "Hey, don't see what I know what you're doing.
Knock it off." That's what I expect.
She will be arguing with them to her, in the face. And I think that is so important. I think I still have this warm, completely unexpected smile that is imprinted on my face by the fact that Tulsi Gabbard, who was put on a politicized terror watch list by the last administration, is now the director of national intelligence. The CIA and the NSA report to Tulsi Gabbard.
That's amazing. Yeah. That is absolutely amazing.
That alone might be worth it. Everything.
Yeah, I'm curious. I cannot wait to see how this shakes out and how those guys have to, like you say, report to her specifically. And the fact, personally, I'm thrilled that she's a woman, a second woman in charge in that position behind Avril Haines, who was the last one. But Avril Haines was a CIA swamp thing, right? Like when she was spooked to the core. This is a totally different animal. Tulsi Gabbard. I mean, I disagree with her on many topics, but when it comes to just being a little more fair and balanced towards who the so-called U.S. enemies are, she's the fairest of them all.
And understanding the realities of American foreign policy in its recent history, right? I mean,
yeah. Without agreeing with her on everything, you really can't expect any better from the United States. That is just phenomenal.
Yeah, this is great. And I wonder if this is going to be her path towards running for office again.
Don't knock on wood. Don't say it out loud right yet. Don't do that.
I know, super early.
Don't jinx it.
I would say no, because you know what? In American politics is very unkind to people who switch parties. If you switch parties,
let's see her
you are
survive
never trusted
the next
again,
4 years as DNI.
Let's
literally survive the next 4 years as DNI.
Yeah.
Let's see. Mark Sleboda, always appreciate you coming on, and thank you for making extra time, because we knew there was just so much to unpack, obviously. So we appreciate you rushing home.
And there's so much we didn't get to.
Evening. Yeah, and there's still so much we didn't get to, but I mean, we chipped away as much as we could. Thank you so much for taking time for us. Mark Sleboda, of course, is an international relations and security analyst. You can follow Mark on Twitter, which we still call Twitter, at Mark Sleboda 1, the number 1. Check out his YouTube and Telegram channel called Realpolitik with a CK at the end, Realpolitik with Mark Sleboda, and also on Facebook and Substack with the same name, Realpolitik with a CK.
Realpolitik with Mark Sleboda. Yeah, the branding makes some consistent sense. Yes.
Great. And then facebook.com/Gramsci. Always have a good time when you join us, Mark. So thank you so much. This is like just I don't
Thank
know.
you, Mark.
I'm personally happy. I'm happy that the
Ted,
talks have
Ted
begun.
Manila, having a long conversation with you again, it's like an old family meeting. It's very nostalgic.
Totally.
It gives me
is.
gives me a warm fuzzy too.
Me too.
And then we spiral into talking about like new wave music and Devo's coming over here to DC.
Yeah, no, they're playing in New York.
Duran, baby, Duran.
I've met them. They kept the hair in the early 2000s.
Old school cartoons too. Don't forget those old school cartoons.
That's right.
Cannot forget
Sundar the Barbarian.
That's it.
Sundar the Barbarian.
Yep.
Thank you, Mark. We'll look forward to having you back again.
Bye,
Cheers,
Mark.
everybody.
Thanks. All right, guys, that is going to do it for us here on the TMI show. I mean, like I said, an hour is hardly enough with Mark with a lot of knowledge in that one human there, especially being on the ground in Moscow. It's he knows it's the pulse of the society, in Moscow. So, and having a native English speaker there
and he's married to a Russian lady.
Yeah, her family's from Crimea.
Crimean lady.
Yeah, so they would know. I mean, he has said to us over and over that the Crimeans refer to themselves as Russians.
Oh, no, that's undeniably true. Yeah,
that they've never ever said we're Ukrainian. They either say they're Crimean specifically, or they're just broadly that they're Russian. So that's going to stay an official part of Russia. Hegseth said it. Trump, I don't know if he knows where it is on the map, so I don't know. He hasn't said anything about it, but Hegseth said it. So there's that. Now it's time to carve up Ukraine, folks. Maybe by Thanksgiving, that's what we'll be carving up, Ted.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do with the big cities like Zaporozhye and all that, or Kherson. I mean, that's going to be, there can be some ugliness when you move borders after a war, right? Which is also interesting, like sort of like the partition. You don't want a partition of India type situation. So which was very ugly.
Yeah, which also, like when the French partitioned 16 provinces of Laos and gave it to Thailand, we're still angry about this.
Oh, I didn't even know that happened. Although that sounds like a very French colonial thing to do.
Yeah, they just randomly partitioned this line and decided, I don't know how, maybe at the Mekong River. So think of it like the Potomac. When the French decided that they were going to vacate, they were like, "Oh, we're gonna have cartographers remap everything." And when they did, they just cut it up along like the Mekong Delta and gave away like 13 or 16 territories of Laos to Thailand. And these are where the Isan people are from, where they speak primarily Lao with a little bit of a Thai accent to it.
Huh.
And they're kind of like the people in the Donetsk or Donbass region. The Thai people kind of look down on them as not as undermentioned, like, oh, you're the stinky lowly Lao people, and the Lao people are like, you're kind of Thai, but we'd prefer you be a part of us. So that's the whole thing that happened there, and I don't want to see that happen with the Russian people in Donbass. Let's call it a day. Rewrite the maps. Google and Apple, go ahead and carve it up, make it official. Let's just start now so people can adopt it, Ted, by the end of the year. I'm just saying.
Hopefully it'll catch better than the Gulf of America. Did you hear, by the way, that Trump banned the Associated Press, which is the nation's preeminent wire service, from all press conferences at the White House and otherwise because they refused
forever?
Because they refused to change to use the term the Gulf of America.
I think that's a bad thing, but
it is a bad thing. And the AP says they're going to sue under the First Amendment because they're being retaliated against. Because and the government's like, well, you don't have a right to cover us. So I think it'll be a super interesting legal challenge.
It's hilarious in the worst kind of a way, but it's very
the Gulf of
era.
America thing just came out of. Right, it came out of nowhere, right? He didn't campaign
we'll discuss
on that
tomorrow. I know that just and like Mount McKinley and all this. We'll discuss it tomorrow.
Although the AP agreed to keep it Mount McKinley, they've agreed to use that, even though it's part of the same executive order.
Right, but not Gulf of America.
Well, the logic was that the Gulf of America has not been recognized by any other country, whereas there's no need to have any other country involved in what we rename a mountain that is in the United States.
Well, our maritime economic zone is 200 miles off any part of that coastline. So technically, that 200 miles is quite large. You can call that. I don't know how big the Gulf actually is.
Yeah, I don't know how. I don't know. I would imagine it definitely puts a major dent into the Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah, so I don't know. Maybe there's
really
a fair argument.
Our property. International waters start at 12 miles, don't they?
I don't know. Our economic zone is 200. I know that from that Gulf coastline.
But economic zone is not really the same thing as
international border. That I don't know. So where?
I mean, like if
who trumps who?
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll discuss that tomorrow. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll be back 10 a.m. Eastern tomorrow. Make sure you guys please like and subscribe to the show, whatever platform that you are consuming this on. And of course, it will notify you when we hit the stream. A lot of the times, the notifications run a little slow.
And good news. For those of you on YouTube, y'all now can actually do super chats. So if y'all want to submit questions, then what you can do is click on the chat box, click super chat, write in your question. We'll see it, and then we can put it towards the guests. So that just went live an hour ago.
Oh, the super chats. I'm still new to all of this. I'm gonna look. I'm gonna pop it up on the screen just to see our daily viewer here.
Yeah,
Low Aller. That's what that does, huh? You can put
well, so you can pop up on the chat where people can see, but like how sometimes Adrian will do or Nerd will do the Rumble rants, and you'll get this chat just really highlighted. You can't miss it. People on YouTube can now do the exact same thing, and you start with $1, and then you can go up to as high as you want. But the moral of the story is, if you do a super chat, you donate to the show, and you get to get your question read on air.
Yes.
Unless we hate your question, in which case.
Well, no, because
question's dumb.
Well, no, because that falls under the troll tax. So you still have to accommodate.
That's fair.
Yeah,
I mean, that is fair. All right, thank you.
We don't do double standards here. Okay. Bye.
Thank you for that update, producer Robbie. All right, so now you guys know. Thank you so much. We'll be back again tomorrow. Hasta mañana, amigos. See ya.
Au revoir.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye.